Section 12 of Gray's Anatomy, Part 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Anatomy of the Human Body, Part 3, by Henry Gray. Section 12, Part 1. The External Carotid Artery, A. Carotis externa. The external carotid artery begins opposite the upper border of the thyroid cartilage, and, taking a slightly curved course, passes upward and forward, and then inclines backward to the space behind the neck of the mandible, where it divides into the superficial temporal and internal maxillary arteries. It rapidly diminishes in size in its course up the neck, owing to the number and large size of the branches given off from it. In the child, it is somewhat smaller than the internal carotid, but in the adult the two vessels are of nearly equal size. At its origin, this artery is more superficial, and placed nearer the middle line than the internal carotid, and is contained within the carotid triangle. Relations. The external carotid artery is covered by the skin, superficial fascia, platysma, deep fascia, and anterior margin of the sternocleidomastoideus. It is crossed by the hypoglossal nerve, by the lingual, ranine, common facial, and superior thyroid veins, and by the digastricus and stylohyoideus. Higher up it passes deeply into the substance of the parotid gland, where it lies deep to the facial nerve and the junction of the temporal and internal maxillary veins. Medial to it are the hyoid bone, the wall of the pharynx, the superior laryngeal nerve, and a portion of the parotid gland. Lateral to it, in the lower part of its course, is the internal carotid artery. Posterior to it, near its origin, is the superior laryngeal nerve, and higher up it is separated from the internal carotid by the styloglossus and stylopharyngeus, the glossopharyngeal nerve, the pharyngeal branch of the vagus, and part of the parotid gland. Branches. The branches of the external carotid artery may be divided into four sets. 1. Anterior. Superior thyroid, lingual, external maxillary. 2. Posterior. Occipital, posterior auricular. 3. Ascending. Ascending pharyngeal. 4. Terminal. Superficial temporal, internal maxillary. 1. The superior thyroid artery, A. thyroidea superior, arises from the external carotid artery just below the level of the greater cornu of the hyoid bone, and ends in the thyroid gland. Relations. From its origin under the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoideus, it runs upward and forward for a short distance in the carotid triangle, where it is covered by the skin, platysma, and fascia. It then arches downward beneath the omohyoideus, sternohyoideus, and sternothyroideus. To its medial side are the constrictor pharyngeus inferior and the external branch of the superior laryngeal nerve. Branches. It distributes twigs to the adjacent muscles and numerous branches to the thyroid gland, anastomosing with its fellow of the opposite side, and with the inferior thyroid arteries. The branches to the gland are generally two in number. One, the larger, supplies principally the anterior surface on the isthmus of the gland. It anastomoses with the corresponding artery of the opposite side. A second branch descends on the posterior surface of the gland and anastomoses with the inferior thyroid artery. Besides the arteries distributed to the muscles and to the thyroid gland, the branches of the superior thyroid are hyoid, sternocleidomastoid, superior laryngeal, cricothyroid. The hyoid branch, ramus hyoideus infrahyoid branch, is small and runs along the lower border of the hyoid bone, beneath the thyrohyoideus, and anastomoses with the vessel of the opposite side. The sternocleidomastoid branch, ramus sternocleidomastoideus, sternomastoid branch, runs downward and lateralward across the sheath of the common carotid artery. and supplies the sternocleidomastoideus and neighboring muscles and integument. It frequently arises as a separate branch from the external carotid. The superior laryngeal artery, A. laryngeus superior, larger than either of the preceding, accompanies the internal laryngeal branch of the superior laryngeal nerve beneath the thyrohyoideus. It pierces the hyothyroid membrane and supplies the muscles, mucous membrane, and glands of the larynx, anastomosing with the branch from the opposite side. The cricothyroid branch, ramus cricothyroideus, is small and runs transversely across the cricothyroid membrane, communicating with the artery of the opposite side. 2. The lingual artery, A. lingualis, arises from the external carotid between the superior thyroid and external maxillary. It first runs obliquely upward and medialward to the greater cornu of the hyoid bone. It then curves downward and forward, forming a loop which is crossed by the hypoglossal nerve, and passing beneath the digastricus and the stylohyoideus, it runs horizontally forward, beneath the hyoglossus, and finally, ascending almost perpendicularly to the tongue, turns forward on its lower surface as far as the tip, under the name of the profunda linguae. Relations. Its first or oblique portion is superficial and is contained within the carotid triangle. It rests upon the constrictor pharyngeus medius and is covered by the platysma and the fascia of the neck. Its second or curved portion also lies upon the constrictor pharyngeus medius, being covered at first by the tendon of the digastricus and by the stylohyoideus, and afterward by the hyoglossus. Its third or horizontal portion lies between the hyoglossus and genioglossus. The fourth or terminal part, under the name of the profunda linguae, rhenine artery, runs along the under surface of the tongue to its tip. Here it is superficial, being covered only by the mucous membrane. Above it is the longitudinalis inferior, and on the medial side the genioglossus. The hypoglossal nerve crosses the first part of the lingual artery, but is separated from the second part by the hyoglossus. Branches. The branches of the lingual artery are hyoid, dorsalis linguae, sublingual, profunda linguae. The hyoid branch, ramus hyoideus, suprahyoid branch, runs along the upper border of the hyoid bone, supplying the muscles attached to it and anastomosing with its fellow of the opposite side. The arteriae dorsalis linguae, rami dorsalis linguae, consist usually of 2 or 3 small branches which arise beneath the hyoglossus. They ascend to the back of the dorsum of the tongue and supply the mucous membrane in this situation. The glossopalatine arch, the tonsil, soft palate, and epiglottis, anastomosing with the vessels of the opposite side. The sublingual artery, A. sublingualis, arises at the anterior margin of the hyoglossus and runs forward between the genioglossus and mylohyoideus to the sublingual gland. It supplies the gland and gives branches to the mylohyoideus and neighboring muscles, and to the mucous membrane of the mouth and gums. One branch runs behind the alveolar process of the mandible in the substance of the gum to anastomose with a similar artery from the other side. Another pierces the mylohyoideus and anastomoses with the submental branch of the external maxillary artery. The arteria profunda linguae, rhenine artery, deep lingual artery, is the terminal portion of the lingual artery. It pursues a tortuous course and runs along the under surface of the tongue, below the longitudinalis inferior, and above the mucous membrane. It lies on the lateral side of the genioglossus, accompanied by the lingual nerve. At the tip of the tongue, it is said to anastomose with the artery of the opposite side, but this is denied by Hyrtl. In the mouth, these vessels are placed one on either side of the frenulum linguae. 3. The external maxillary artery, A. maxillaris externa,